and the way to kind of really engage them in doing that and to plan around how you do that effectively. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Just to let you know, we're recording the session, obviously, for other people who can't actually attend today. So I will share my slide deck with you. Let me just, hopefully this behaves today. I'm always a bit ham-fisted with this, so bear with me. Let me see if I can get that. Right now, hopefully you can now see my deck. Can I get a thumbs up from someone? Great.
We've got Teams meeting at the moment. We've got. I can see desktop and browser at the moment, not the pack.
Oh, not the pack. Oh, hang on. Let me see. That's what happened to me yesterday. Let me see what's going on. That should be the one. Right, now can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Good, excellent stuff. Right.
That's one.
Excellent. Right, okay, I'll just put this in slideshow. Great. So Dan and I are running the session today. I'm one of the Bounce Back coaches. I've got a background in digital design. Quite a lot of the work I do is actually around designing new digital services. And Dan Gibson works for Create Engage, who are a creative marketing agency who work particularly with management consultancies. So the purpose of today, as I said, is really to help you think about how to make the most of thinking about planning your marketing and making it really work for you. So obviously, the most logical place to start with this is to kind of think about, well, why are you bothering to do this at all? Because there's no good in sort of thinking, oh, well, I want to speak to lots of people if you don't really know why you want to speak to them, who you want to speak to, and most importantly, what actually is the point of speaking to them. So I always feel it's very important whenever you're thinking about bits of work that you're doing, I mean, regardless of where you are in the organisation and what it is you're doing, to try and think about how it actually overlays against the big picture of what you're trying to achieve. So I always think it's worth looking at your strategy before you start thinking about anything to do with marketing, comms. So one thing I would just like as a straw poll is if you could just put your hands up and let me know how many of you have actually got a strategy in place as it stands at the moment. I'm guessing it's going to be a bit of a mix. A general strategy as opposed to anything to do with marketing, that is. Not many of you, from the hands I can see at the moment anyway. All right, well then this should be quite useful for you. This is a really simplified way just to think on a really top line basis about what it is you want to achieve and the key things you need to be thinking about in order to achieve that. So this is a really simple tool. I mean, it's called a vector tool, but that doesn't really matter in terms of using it. But it's a way to simply start mapping out what it is that you want to achieve. Obviously, once you've done this, you'd have to go through all the thinking, the substance to make it really stack up. But it's a really good way to unblock thinking and start to get something down on paper. So as you'll see here, on the right, you've got your vision, and then you've got 3 stages in terms of how you build that up. The vision should be your kind of big picture goal of what it is ultimately you want to achieve. Year 3 is really, I guess, what good looks like in 3 years' time when you're thinking, yeah, I've done a really good job. What would 3 years look like? And then obviously years 1 and 2 are kind of what you would need in order to feel that you've got yourselves the right steps forward in order to get to where you want to be in year 3 in that wider vision. So the way I usually think about this is kind of 3 big buckets of information. What's your goal? So I think, you know, as you'll see here under years 1, 2, 3 and your vision, writing actually what you're aiming for really helps kind of act as almost your North Star, the thing that really guides you in terms of what it is that you're doing, what most importantly you're not doing, and how to make, you know, on a day-to-day basis, it should be the sort of thing that helps make your decision making and the day-to-day running of what you're doing easier. It's like, if it fits within this thing I want to actually achieve over the next year, great. If it doesn't, should I really be doing it, or do I need to think about adjusting my goal? It could be either one of those things, but it means you're making more informed decisions about why you're doing things. So the way I generally think of it, approaching this is to look at the big picture first. So what is it, as I said, longer term you're trying to achieve? So look at the vision and possibly even your year 3 first. The reason I say that, And it depends on the way your mind works, but I think it's very easy if you start with year one to get very bogged down in the detail of all the things you do day to day, why you can and can't do things. And basically, it's very easy to get lost in the woods in terms of too much detail and things that actually aren't necessarily going to get you to where you would really ultimately like to be. So I would say my personal preference in terms of good practice is to start with the big picture stuff first, and then once you've done that, go back to the beginning and build up to make sure what you've done really stacks up and seems credible to achieve those things in year 3 and in your vision. So once you've got the goals, think about what the key steps, or sometimes they're referred to as milestones, things that you can measure that enable you to feel that you're actually achieving that goal. You'll probably have a few things under there ultimately, if you were doing this for yourself. But they should be things that enable you to feel that you've achieved that goal you have for that particular year. And then the key inputs. So inputs could be anything. I mean, things basically from the milestones that you have in order to achieve the big picture goal you've got for that year. And obviously, we're looking at this with a view to marketing. So think about, if you said, for example, your big picture goal was that you wanted to become more of a regional player in youth work, for example, or, make more difference to young people's lives in South Yorkshire. I'm just making something up. You'd probably be wanting to say, in year 3, we want to be operating in three new areas in the region, for example. So what you'd be trying to say for year 1 is, well, at the moment we're working in one area. So you might be thinking that the milestones for that are things around being able to make sure you've got your impact and your evidence base there, that you've improved and systematized some of your processes and systems, and you're starting to look at longer term fundraising strategies to help you think about how you might want to grow. And if you're thinking about the comms stuff, it might be that you're starting to try and secure more awards, trying to actually produce more reports to show how good you are, what you're doing, in order to obviously start to work towards building up to these more ambitious goals you've got for yourself over the next few years. So that's in broad terms how it kind of works. So, I mean, obviously we sent you a bit of pre-thinking, so hopefully none of this is a massive surprise. So what I'd like you to have a go at doing now is to do this for yourselves. So I'm going to give you, I'm going to give you 10 minutes just to allow a little time to talk about this once you've done it. So if I can give you 10 minutes on the clock to go through this process for yourself. Just before I do, does anyone have any questions or clarification on what you need to do? Great. In which case, we'll get going. So I'm going to give you 10 minutes on the clock now. And if you've got any questions as you're doing this, please just let me know. Morning, Mike. We're just doing a bit of planning around strategy. Hopefully you can see the screen share. We're just trying to map out what your general strategy would be for your organisation, just very high level stuff, big headings basically. So give it a bash. The information hopefully is reasonably self-explanatory, but if you need me to explain anything, either put a question or two in the chat, or I can, well, speak up. Hi, Mike. I don't know if you heard me, but brilliant. And we're just working on mapping the strategy. There's a slide, hopefully you can see, which gives you just basically an outline of how to approach this. I'd normally say start with a vision and then work back from year one upwards in mapping. So the idea is just to put very top line headings to map out what it is that you're trying to do as an organisation over the next 3 years. If you've got any questions, just put them in the chat, and I can help clarify, hopefully. We've got about 4 minutes left, just a bit more than that. I just wanted to check in with you. How are you getting on? How are you finding it? Linda, I can see you. I can't hear you.
I thought we're finding it quite difficult, but my colleague Abigail says we're not because we've got things wrote down, so I'm not quite sure.
No, if you've got stuff written down, that is the best place to be, definitely.
Yeah.
Victoria, how are you doing?
I think I struggled as well. I know what I need to be doing now and where I want to be, but the in between, I was a bit like, yeah.
I mean, it is deliberately, I mean, it is one of these things, if you've not done it, it's hard. And I think it's one of these things I would also say, if you haven't done this before, take a couple of passes, go away for a walk, come back to it another day. And actually, the more times you look at it, the easier it will become. And actually, the best thing is once you've done this, it's so much easier to actually then start to think about writing, you know, a plan with all the details and so on and so forth. But it gives you kind of the framework around what it is that you're actually wanting to do overall. And that makes the rest of it so much easier.
I think if you do it with a team, I think, you know, I think you get more ideas bouncing around.
Yeah. Rachel, how have you found it so far?
Put my microphone on, sorry. Yeah, I think because I've got really sort of quite big end goals. Put them into sort of a really sensible order so that the big things are sort of into the future, but everything that I do and the process up to there means that I get a following and a group of people that are interested in what I'm doing on the way to the end goal kind of thing. Yeah.
Perfect. No, it sounds like you're right in absolutely the right ballpark. Brilliant. Brilliant. That's your time up. So I'm just also going to come to a couple of people who are currently off camera. Mike, you came in a little bit late. How did you find it? Is there anything else I can kind of explain or clarify? I think Mike might be still having connection issues. Becky, how about you? How have you found it?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah. Fine. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually struggled a little bit, so I wrote quite a bit to say I struggled. It's really bizarre. But I think the reason I struggled is because what I do day to day is practice. So often we're thinking very much in, right, this is the hour rather than what we're going to be, you know what I mean, rather than what it's going to look like in 3 years. But I am quite bigger picture, so I'm having to kind of pull away from that in the moment and think obviously in the future and then how to get there, and from a full service point of view rather than just my area, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, the way I often think about strategy and strategic thinking is a bit like a muscle. Do you know what I mean? If you do it all the time, it's actually quite easy. If you do it very infrequently, it's a bit like, you know, when you know, somebody says, I'm going to do the 0 to 5K and they've not done anything for years. And you go,
yeah.
This is hard work. So I think it's one of those things, the more times you do it, the easier it will become. I mean, I know there's no consolation when you're sitting there having to come bend your brain, but I definitely think that helps. Just keep practicing. I know that seems like a very simplified thing to say, but it definitely does help. Any other thoughts, reflections? Jane, you're down in the bottom of my screen. I can see you there. How did you find it? Oh, you're mute. That's all right.
Oh, can you
Got
hear
you.
me?
I can hear you now.
Sorry.
That's right.
It's difficult really because we're a new friends group.
Yeah.
And at this moment in time, I'm working flat out on it's St Mary's bicentenary.
Yeah.
So there's a plan, but we haven't got it's not really strategic because there's so few of us.
Yeah.
So, you know, I can see the benefit of this. It's further down the line.
Yeah. I mean, the thing I would also say is you could also use the same structure and do it on a much more kind of a small scale, if that felt more relevant to you now. I mean, that's the good thing about this. You can use it in different ways. So you don't necessarily have to think big picture. If you wanted to do it, say, for the next year, if you've got loads on and very limited capacity, you could follow the same approach, just do it on a smaller scale. So if that helps, think about those terms as well.
Yeah,
Great. Catherine, I don't know if you can hear me okay. Yeah, difficult to know whether people are having connectivity issues or not. I'll go to one more person. Victoria, I think, no, we've already spoken, haven't we? I think we've covered most people now who I think can hear me okay. So what I'm going to do now is move on to the next stage in the process. So once you've understood and thought a bit more about where it is overall you're actually trying to go as an organisation and what it is you're trying to achieve, obviously you're trying to think a little bit more about, well, in the context of the world we're talking about here, we're talking about your marketing. So you've probably hopefully got some things in there that are broadly mapping out some of the things you know you need to do over the next few years from a communications point of view. But the big thing is you've got to understand who it is you want to speak to. So this is just a really simple exercise to help you think about who are the key individuals, groups or organisations you need to communicate with. Think in general terms if there are any that are kind of more important to you or not, and try and be as specific as possible about who they are, because obviously you could put some categories of people like people in South Yorkshire. It's probably a bit too general. So try and be a little bit more specific about who that group actually is, because it'll make your life a lot easier if you're actually trying to think about how you're going to speak to them. So if you could just spend a couple of minutes just writing down your key audiences you want to speak to. And the other thing I would say is don't worry if you haven't got 6. It's more about quality than quantity. So if there are 2 or 3 audiences, 3 or 4 that you feel are actually important, there's no one else, that's absolutely fine too. Okay, I'm going to give you 2 minutes on the clock now. Right, you've just got a few seconds left. Great. So how did you, hopefully by comparison, that seemed like a much easier exercise. See, I'm trying to be kind to you, do difficult stuff and then a bit of easier stuff. That's all planned. So just I'd be really interested actually. Linda, sorry, you're right. You're right in the middle of the screen. So I'm afraid you're the person I keep coming to first. How did you find that? And I'm just interested, how many audiences did you end up with for your organisation?
Ended up with 5.
Yeah.
much easier to do.
Yeah.
But the carer support service, what I've put is, first of all, carers in Barnsley.
Yeah.
Second audience would be carers in Rotherham, because we are expanding into Rotherham.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thirdly, young people who may become carers in future, and as a digital world, so to speak.
Yeah.
I think young people need to be aware.
Yeah.
Local organisations, and then I've put national organisations, just so that they are aware. I'm not sure about that last one, but am I on right track?
Yeah, and I think the next exercise we do will probably help you refine down a little bit more, and it may also help you think about where you need to learn a little bit more about those people, because there's some, as you say, like the national organisations, you might think, well, we might need to be a bit more specific about who it is that we're really trying to target there.
Yeah.
Jane, how did you find that? Hopefully easier.
Well, that was a lot easier, because this is my bread and butter, really.
I thought it might be.
So, well, I did it in sort of generalities, but basically people who are already involved in St Mary's, so like the PCC and the congregation.
Yeah.
People who have visited but maybe haven't been back.
Yeah.
And then people who don't know St Mary's at all. So to target people and attract them in, really.
No, that's great. That's brilliant. I'm going to try some of the other people I can't see, just to see if I'm able to get them. Mike, any luck? How did you find that?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, we've got five audience groups.
Brilliant.
So basically, we're looking to market our facilities to support the YMCA's youth groups. So that income supports that. We have a sports hall and a community centre. So we're looking at community groups, sports groups, schools. We seem to be doing quite well with NHS groups at the moment. And particularly a group we want to look at is the retired, because kind of daytime use of the sports hall. Brilliant.
Fantastic. That's really, and it's also just helpful for me to have a bit of a flavour of who's in the room and kind of where your heads are at in terms of who you're trying to speak to as well. Who else haven't I actually spoken to? Kirsten, I haven't spoken to you yet.
Hi.
Hi.
Mine is a little bit vague, just because I don't think I've pinned down the vision bit, so it made it a little bit more complicated, so it's more like potential people. I've got things like others in the organisation, so getting your buy-in from your team, your trustees, or whoever that might be. Existing funders, potential funders, existing and potential clients as two separate groups.
Yeah.
And also like looking at your partnerships, so whether that be education or health or wherever. So it is a bit vague, but I found it all right. But yeah, it's vague, because I think I haven't pinned down the sort of top line yet.
Yeah, I think the next couple of exercises will probably help with that a little bit as well. Who else haven't I spoken to? Victoria, how did you find that? If you can hear me okay?
Yeah, I'm same. So we support other groups to run projects and mostly events. So there's kind of lots of audiences depending on which project we're thinking about.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're quite difficult, because we run a youth group, so that's targeting young people. Then we run events from Monkbretton Priory, so that's its own kind of audience. And then we work with the volunteers, so again, those are the audience. And then obviously wider community, trying to get them to come to the events, so it's a bit of a mix. So I think it might need a bit more streamlining.
Yeah. Don't worry, that's fine. Right, I'll come to a couple of you I haven't spoken to for the next round. Catherine, thanks. I know you're having trouble with your laptop, so hoping you can hear us okay at least. Right, I'm going to move on to the next thing to do. So you've already started to think about prioritising, but this is just a little way to give you a bit more of a hard-nosed opportunity to think about how you prioritise which people really matter to you. Now, obviously, this is looking at it from a very hard-nosed commercial world. Obviously, there are an awful lot of you who are values-based organisations, so I'm very aware this is not going to be this cut and dry, because there may be people you'd say, well, there's not necessarily any really commercial reason for us to do this, but morally we really feel we have to. So I'm very happy if there are things you say, well, it doesn't necessarily fit into the kind of obvious place for us to be really focusing our energies, but because of what we do and what we stand for, we're going to do it anyway, and that's completely fine. But this tool, and you can use it for not just thinking about your audiences, you can use this more generally in marketing, but you can also use it as a tool to think about projects you're running, or even, for example, new lines of work that you want to take on strategically. So it's actually quite a useful tool to use. The idea of this is really to help you think about what it is that you're trying to achieve. So there are basically 4 segments you can see. As you can see here on the left, it says rate of growth. So that's kind of in the ever-changing world we're in. Is it something, as you know, things go through waves. Is it something that looks like people are getting more interested in, they're more likely to want to buy, that matters more to people, i.e., is it the sort of thing there's growth in? And then market share. Now, you've probably heard this term before. Some of you might be already familiar with it. But this is, I guess, your size of the pie. You know, do you think within the area that you're going to operate in or want to operate in over the next few years in terms of your plan, what size of the pie do you actually want to have? What size of the market do you want to have? You know, using very businessy jargon. So this is a way to help you think about, well, you know, actually this will give us a good size of the pie and it's something that's growing. Great, that's something we really want to do. That's kind of what you're trying to get out of this exercise. So the way these boxes work is to help you kind of categorize where things sit. Dogs are, well, as you can see, they're down here on the bottom left. So those are things that are not really growing. They're probably not going to ever give you, they're probably things that are a bit more niche. You know, they're a bit more specialists. They're not necessarily something that's going to have a wide appeal, and they're not really growing. Now, it might be because of the type of work you do that you may say, well, there's things in there that we do still feel we really want to do because of what we stand for. But if you're looking at it from a hard-nosed commercial point of view to keep the organisation afloat, they're probably not going to be the things that are going to do that for you. Cash cows, these can be, the way I often think of these are your tried and tested staples. So in the commercial world, it's things like, I'm trying to think of a good example. So things like if you were running a supermarket, it's those kind of staple things that everyone wants all the time. The boring things that don't really go up and down in terms of fashion, you know, things like your milk, your toilet roll. It's the kind of your equivalent of those things, the things that you know, within the world of what you do, people will always want. They're not necessarily going to grow lots, but they are things that will consistently always bring in custom and bring in the type of work that you want to do. So those are things you're probably always going to kind of want to keep going and keep sweet. The only question is if they suddenly start to change and become dogs, and maybe they become less relevant at some point. You know, I mean, I know local council, for example, their funding around things change. So some things will change. So you should review this every year or quarter, whatever you feel is most useful for you. Question marks. Now, this probably also depends on your personality as the person who's running your organisation or involved in the decision making, your appetite for risk. These tend to be things that are growing fast. They're probably more niche, but because they're growing fast, they might be things that become much more fashionable. I mean, obviously, if you look in the world of social media, it's the sort of thing that happened to TikTok around the time that COVID hit. TikTok at the time when COVID hit was not really heard of amongst, you know, most of the population. And then obviously after about 5 months of lockdown or even less, suddenly, because all the young people were using it at home and bored, their parents were using it, and suddenly it became one of these things that a lot more people were talking about. And now, you know, it's become much more mainstream, and they're using it on big broadcasts like Strictly Come Dancing and things like that. So it's those sorts of things that have gone from being niche, but have the potential, and that's the big thing, have the potential to become something much bigger. The risk is they might not. So you could invest a lot of energy in something that seems very new and whizzy. And I'm sure within the world of, for example, local councils or funders, there are things that everyone gets very excited about, they become the next big thing and they look like they're going to be very fashionable. And actually, when you start doing it, you've invested a huge amount of time and resource, and actually the thing's fallen flat on its face. So that's the risk with those things. But if you get it right, then obviously they could become the final group I'm going to talk about, which are your stars. So these tend to be the things that I guess if you were thinking about your prioritization, these are the things you're going to be looking at as the best opportunities for you in terms of doing new things to grow your organization. So these are things which I guess have already got enough credibility, you know that they're likely to continue to grow and that people want them. And they are things that are areas where you know you're likely to continue to have the potential to grow. So if you know you're really good at something and it's the sort of thing that people want, it's likely to be sitting in that star category. If it's growing and you know it's what people want and people are likely to want more of it, it's likely to be sitting in that top right box. So what I'd like you to do is I'm going to give you about 5 minutes just to have a little bit of a chance to reflect, with those audiences you've thought about, thinking about, well, where would they sit on this? Are these people, that we want to speak to, that we think are going to give us a real opportunity in terms of how we think about growing our organisation? Are they people that, we've been speaking to for years, but really aren't necessarily all that, it's probably more niche, but we do it because of values reasons? Are they things that we think new audiences, we don't really know, we think it might be a real golden opportunity, but we could also potentially sink a huge amount of effort into this, and it could be a bit of a waste of time, but has the potential to be something quite exciting, which might sit in the question mark category. So with that kind of lens, think about your audiences and where they'd sit in those buckets, and try and pick out, once you've done that, your top 3, and probably from that you'll find one that you think, yes, that is definitely going to be the one we really think is going to go somewhere. And if you're thinking about how you want to spend the time in the session, you might pick your most obvious one to work with. You might also want to pick the second one if you're less familiar with them, because it may well be your first audience you know really well already. So I'll leave it to you, but definitely think about your shortlist and the one that you would probably like to spend a bit more time thinking about for the remainder of the session. That would be really helpful. I hope that's clear. Does anyone have any questions before I let you get on? Great, I'm going to give you 5 minutes on the clock.
Sorry, Helen, can we just ask a question really quickly?
Yeah.
So we're struggling to kind of understand what we're prioritizing. So
Yeah.
I think it's the word products that are kind of throwing us, because in my mind, it's now thinking of the services we offer, rather than the audiences we're trying to reach.
Yeah. You can use this in 2 ways. You can use, as I said, you can use this for your services, but in the context of what we're doing today, think about it in terms of your audiences. Does that help?
Yes. I'm just not sure what it means in terms of like growth markets.
So if you're thinking about people where you think there's real potential to grow what you want to do engagement wise with them, does that kind of help?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's kind of, it's putting, with your marketing hat on, definitely thinking about the people you want to speak to, where you think there's more potential to do more with them, or where you want to reach more of them because you think you should be doing more in that area. Does that help clarify? Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
No, that's fine. It's a good question. I'm just going to swap the deck, because I think actually what I've given you is the simplified version with the tools rather than the full deck. So just bear with me. I'll kill this one and I'll bring back the other one. It's got a bit more detail in it. So if this disappears, I'll bring it back, I promise. Great. How did you find that exercise? Rachel, you're right in the middle of my screen, so I'm going to come to you first.
Hi. Yeah, that was okay because what I tried to do was take I got 5 odd those into each of the groups rather than a product or service. So the audience, because I think the audience would make it really easy to see what I'm pointing at them, kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, so I've managed to get into each of the 4 boxes at least 1 or 2 of the audience groups, which would be a different product or service.
Great. And have you've got your short list, have you, out of all of it? Brilliant, fantastic. Catherine, how's your laptop behaving? How did you find that?
Great. Yeah, sorry about that. It keeps throwing me out and bringing me back. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Can you hear me?
Fine. Yeah.
So yeah, with this, I split our markets up, and the big one for me is in question marks, because that's young people. So we're Barnsley Museums and Heritage Trust, and a lot of our donors and supporters I've put in the cash cow side.
Yeah.
A lot of them seem to be of a certain age, and we struggle to attract younger people, especially sort of between sort of teenage and sort of 25 sort of age. And I think they could potentially have huge potential, but because the people running the trust are middle-aged, it's finding the communication channels, I think, that they actually use. I'm not sure we're even on the right page. We still use Facebook. I'm not sure that anyone under 25 does. I don't know. Things like that. So I think that's where I focused on, and we haven't got any stars, sorry, sadly.
No.
But for dogs,
go on. No, go on, Carol.
And then for dogs, I said the wider community that we're trying to, because we're quite low on the priority list, it tends to be our supporters have to be particularly interested in us, so we're quite niche in that term. So yeah, the one that I'd really like to focus on through this is the young people, really.
Brilliant. No, that's fantastic. Thank you. I'm aware we're kind of a little bit tight on time, so I'm going to move on to the next section. Are you all okay in terms of the deck? Sorry, I had to swap decks. Can you see the slide deck okay? No, you can't. Okay, let me see if I can stop sharing this and try again.
No.
Always technology. It's great when it works, and it's not so good when it doesn't. Hang on, let me see. I'm going to stop and try again. Okay, let me have a look. Window. Let's try that. Better? Can you see the deck now?
Looks good to me.
Good, excellent, thank you. Great. So the other thing that this, hopefully, I mean, I think you've already alluded to this. The other thing this should do is actually help flush out questions. The big thing I would say is when you do this work, particularly if you're doing it for the first time, it will probably throw up a whole bunch of questions as well. So if there are areas where you think, actually, I just don't know, we had somebody yesterday say, well, I think we want to speak to these people, but I've literally got no idea how to engage with them, what they're like, anything. So it might well be that actually that is a point where you think, I might need to go away and do a bit more homework, just talk to some people, do some surveys. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of that stuff in a second. But the idea is also about helping you identify where you've got some gaps in your knowledge that you might need to fill. So what we try and do, just to try and get a bit more of a picture of who we're trying to speak to, is to think about creating some personas around those audiences we've been focusing on. So the big thing I would say about personas is it's trying to kind of make these big headings you've got of people come to life. It's very easy to either project things that you think would be good or that your board think would be good. And actually, it's not about them. If your organisation is going to do its work effectively, it has to connect on a really human level with the people you're actually trying to speak to. And for that reason, personas can be a really powerful and useful tool to help you. I mean, as the description says here, they are usually fictional sort of stereotypes of a particular audience you're trying to speak to. And they're designed to basically, in one simple place, capture the needs, the goals, the character, a little bit of real people you're trying to speak to. What you're trying to do is get a bit more into, I guess, I suppose, how they're thinking about the world. I mean, you know, particularly say you're somebody who's in their early 60s and you realise you've got to speak to somebody who's like 17. Now, you may have grandchildren, you may have, or, you know, you may have a kind of exposure because you're a teacher or whatever to people like that. But if you have no exposure to those people, you might find it a real struggle to understand what it is that's going to matter to these people. So the whole idea about this is to make that job a bit easier for you. So it should help you understand your audience and how you want to engage with them. Most importantly for me, remind you that you're not engaging for yourself or designing for yourself anything that you're doing, but for those you actually want to talk to, and trying to understand what it is that's actually going to attract them or engage them. You know, we're all so busy nowadays. Trying to actually cut through all that noise, you've really got to connect with somebody on a very personal level. When they're getting all the messages on their phone, they're thinking about the job, they're thinking about going shopping, they're thinking about holidays, birthdays, whatever it is, you've got to have something that really makes them think, over and above anything else I'm doing at that moment in time, I want to look at this or want to have a read about this. So it's got to be something that really connects with them on a personal level. What I'm going to ask you to do is to think about creating one for the sort of the audience you said you wanted to focus on. And the most important thing is that this shouldn't be a real person. It should be someone fictional. I have had people, I mentioned this yesterday, who've used real people, and it gets very awkward and can get quite uncomfortable sometimes. So definitely, please do not use somebody who's a real person. I'll move you on to the template. Does anyone have any questions just before I let you get on with that? Hopefully should be an easier thing to do, assuming you speak to people that you're trying to engage with reasonably regularly. Great. I'm going to give you 3 minutes on this, just to help prioritize. You don't necessarily need to do all of it. Obviously focus on things like their name, gender. I think age is really important, actually. Their current location. What do they enjoy, I think, is a really important one. And thinking about their goals, and I think particularly what keeps them awake at night and what attitudes they might have to your organisation or business. Those are probably the most important ones. And the other thing, really importantly from my point of view, is I'm going to ask you all to show your sketches, for those of you who've got cameras functioning on your computers. So be aware, I'm going to ask you to show us your scribbles as well. Okay, I'm going to give you 3 minutes on the clock now. Thanks. Hi, Julie. Thanks for joining us. We're just looking at sort of audiences. So if you can have a think about particular groups of people that you know you want to speak to, there's a bit more context in the deck and in the recording you can find to look at in your own time. But if you can think, just for the exercise we're doing at the moment, to think a little bit more about one particular type of audience you want to speak to. What we're doing at the moment is creating a sort of fictional version of that audience. So in other words, a persona, we call it, but basically a simplified version of that particular audience you want to engage with, a person who would reflect that, basically. And the idea is you're really trying to actually simply summarize a little bit about what that person's like, what matters to them, and basically the idea of doing this is to help you understand a little bit more when you're thinking about what it is you want to do and what you want to communicate, that you're doing it and thinking about what really matters to them rather than what you might think, for example. And the idea is to help you really think about designing for your audience rather than for your board or for you or anything else. The idea is to help you really think about what it is that they need and how to connect with them on a personal level. Okay, how are you doing? How did everybody find that? Kirsten, how did you find that?
Not too bad. Yeah, not too bad. I haven't done a sketch though.
Oh, I'm disappointed. I was hoping to see a sketch.
No, I'm still sort of scribbling down the questions. I'm answering them as I've gone, so I haven't got them written down. I've got them in my head, really.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Victoria, since I can see you, I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you have a sketch to share?
No.
Well, you see, I had the arts guys yesterday, so they had loads and loads of scribbles.
I'm still working on this side, the other side, to be honest.
No, that's all good. Yeah, I knew it's deliberately a bit pacey today because I want to kind of strike a balance of giving you a taster, but equally giving a bit of a chance for you to actually talk to one another. And if you had any questions, obviously to share that. Jane, how did you find that?
Well, impossible really, because I think the whole point about what we're trying to do is to be inclusive and to you know, have as diverse an audience as possible. So to me, this just narrowed it down too much, so I couldn't do it.
That's an interesting point, actually, because I think the idea, I mean, you could do this actually for as many audiences as you wanted. I think the thing is, if, for example, you wanted to be really, really inclusive. So, for example, I've worked with a lot of disabled people's organisations. I know that, for example, I've worked with somebody who was quite severe disabilities they were born with. Now, her needs are going to be fundamentally different from somebody who, say, got a childhood disease and ended up being partially sighted as a result. So you can quite easily do this, those different audiences. I agree, you wouldn't necessarily want to lump them together because of their needs might be different, but the tool will still be really useful for you in terms of how you think about using it. And actually, you may find there's some common patterns actually when you've gone through that around what really motivates them or what keeps them up awake at night. And actually, once you've done that, you might find actually there are more commonalities around what drives and motivates them or worries them and things that will connect with them on a human level than you think. But I would test it with a few chunks of people, and you might find actually there's a bit more overlap than you currently think. I think it can be really helpful actually as a tool to help test some of that, but it's a good challenge actually. Dan, I don't know, did you want to say anything on that? Because I think it's an interesting point.
So did you say Dan?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it is. I think a lot of the stuff that we do today, we're going to try and get quite specific into a single audience and a single kind of persona from that audience. But this tool and this framework can be applied, like you say, and nuanced for all of the different audiences. I think everyone on the call will have slightly different people that they're trying to target, and the output of this will be unique to everybody. And I think the purpose of today is to kind of give everybody the framework to then outside of this session apply it to all the nuances within your organizations and kind of build out what is going to be most important. So I think it's a good challenge, and I think there's different ways that you can take it, but I think for the purpose of this, it's I think key to be focusing on ideally your most important, and then outside of the session applying the framework to the others that, you know, this session will kind of spark some thinking. Well, actually, you think I thought I had one audience, actually I've got 6, and actually within what I thought was my priority audience, there's 3 different nuances that we need to be talking to. And I think when we come onto the content section, we can start to talk a little bit about how we do that as well. So that would be the only kind of thing that I'd add to that.
Yeah. No, thanks, Dan. And I think the thing I would say about all of this is there's a kind of a balance in terms of you doing this stuff, but it's not an end in itself. I suppose that's the way I think of it, is what you're doing is you're trying to learn from it. So when you write this stuff down, there's some stuff you're going to go, yeah, that really feels comfortable. There are other things you're going to be like, oh, actually, I don't really know. Or I think I've just made something up there. I'm not really sure what they want. That's where you need to go away and then start to talking to people. So Jane, for example, if you actually ran a coffee morning, for example, when you've got people in anyway, go and chat to them, you know, ask them some of these questions, you know, what is it that actually, you know, what are your hobbies? What are the things that, you know, you're more worried about? Or you can frame things in a slightly different way that are more around what it is that you do, you know, what is it that we do that gets you really excited? What is it that makes a difference? I did this actually with one of the organisations I work with, who, again, actually, they try and work with a really inclusive audience. And I just said, what is it that really matters about what you do as an organisation? What is it that makes them feel that that's something that really makes a difference to them? What is it that kind of makes them feel that what you do is different from anybody else? Some of those things will actually really help you go through this and make it work a bit better. And as I said, you might find that actually between the people you're speaking to, there's certain common patterns of things that come up, and then you might find actually, oh, that's more of a chunk of people than I immediately thought. But until you've done it, you're not going to know. And I think that's the thing I would say, make a stab at it. And if the things you think, I'm just not sure, this feels like it's too specific, go and talk to some people. That's the best way to make this feel believable.
Can I just say that, I mean, I do talk to people, and we've had open days recently, which I do talk to people, but some of these questions, there's no way I would approach them because I don't think they're relevant. Education level, job, salary.
I mean, the point
I wouldn't talk about politics to people coming in because it can be too I don't know, it can be a bit personal, and it's really not relevant. I mean, what is more important to me is what we have in common, and as far as my work for St Mary's is, it's not about religion for me. It is about the heritage of the church.
I think what we're trying to get at, and I agree, you wouldn't want to ask those questions. It's more those questions I just said to you. Why do you come here? What matters to you about what we do? Why do you come here rather than somewhere else? What you're trying to get to, I think, is understanding a bit more about who this person is. So
that's what I do anyway.
But what I'm saying is to do it in a systematic way where you actually literally go have all this stuff. If you have a coffee morning, write it all down actually in a spreadsheet once you've done it. So I've spoken to these 10 people, I asked them these 6 questions, and write down actually what they've said, because then you'll see it'll just make it a lot easier if you've got all that stuff in one place to see where the patterns are in terms of what they're saying matters to them, things that actually really make a difference to them. It's like, I come here because actually this is the only human contact I have during the week, those sorts of things. And that will start to give you a real sense of what it is that matters to people. But you're doing the right things. As I said, it's probably just trying to actually cluster all that information in one place, and it will help definitely with this stuff. But really good question. Anything else, Rachel? How did you find that?
I've already done this for my groups that I'm working with now. So the people that I really want to work with my project, I've actually got 3 different people. I've actually done a little icon for them all and given them a name, and it's really good because it makes it so that when I'm thinking about anything that I'm doing, it's like, oh, that's Jenny, or that's Diane, or whatever. So I can actually say this is aimed at that specific person. But the bit that we've just done now, I've got 3 or 4 more audiences that are 6, 12, 18 months down the line that I've not considered looking at their personas. So that's what I've done with this one. So I've got a little character. I don't know whether you
oh wow, that's very impressive. I love it. Brilliant. That's fantastic. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to the unmet need. So this connects, and actually a chunk of this is an overlap with the tool you've just done. But what we're really trying to understand is what we often call a pain point, or what problem is it you're trying to solve for that person. So it is, back to that point I made earlier to you, Jane, what is it that's sort of keeping that person awake at night, or troubling them, or making them feel that there's a bit of a gap or a hole in terms of making them feel that their life is happy and well balanced, or something that basically you can solve in the context of what you do. Obviously, we're not trying to, there is no expectation, and we're not trying to suggest you're going to solve all the problems for these the people you engage with. And obviously, some of you will be dealing with some quite complex issues in terms of the type of problems your beneficiaries or your clients are dealing with. But what within the context of what you do, where can you connect with them is what we're really trying to get at. So there are a number of headings here, which I'll show you in a second. But what we're trying to understand is, what is this problem that this person is experiencing that you can try and potentially help them with? So it connects with, I'll just show you, these two things here. What keeps them awake at night, and what attitudes they have about what your organisation does. So think about those two things. And one of the things that I think is a really simple tool to help make this a bit easier, but ask yourself why several times. So why does this matter to this person? You know, you said, well, they feel lonely and isolated, or they've said that they kind of like coming because it's social. Well, why do they like coming? Well, they like coming because actually they feel a bit isolated. Well, why do they feel isolated? Well, because they're actually disabled and at home and they don't get out very much. Well, why aren't they able to do that? Well, their benefits have been cut, so they actually have less support from a carer than they did before, because of, you know, what's happened in the wider economic landscape. Well, why does that matter? Because actually it really restricts their life options to be an independent person, and this is the one lifeline they have to make a difference to them feeling like a person who actually has a connection with the world outside. Then you're getting to the point of something that really, really matters and is compelling. And, you know, and when you're talking and trying to communicate with them, it means you can do it on a really powerful level that really connects with them on a very personal, in a very personal way. So that's kind of where we're trying to go with this. The other things to think about, some of these things are less important for today, but you might want to consider, why hasn't it been met by someone else? You know, is it because it's technologically too difficult, or is it because the council don't care about those things at the moment? Is it because it's just not fashionable, or it's because something that's only people have really started to think about? And then also to talk about why it's important to meet this need. So why do you think as an organisation it's important to meet this need from what you've understood about this person? So here are the headings. Defining the unmet need, well, that should really come from what you've said keeps them awake at night, but just think about it a bit more about what it is that you're actually trying to solve for that person. Whose unmet need it is, well, that should be the person you've already identified. Why it's important to meet this need, I think trying to speak to why you think, what you've understood about this person and why it matters. I wouldn't worry so much about what distinguishes them from others, just in terms of the exercise for today. If you're doing this for yourselves, definitely think about it. But it's really supposed to be helping you think about how you make what you're trying to say to them distinct from what you're saying to other people. This is the one that I would say is most important to think about, really. Why has this unmet need not been satisfied? So why have they not been able to get help to do this thing, or to be able to engage in this way anywhere else, for example? Have a think about that. And again, less important for today, but how is this unmet need currently overcome? So is it that they, for example, are they going to a local cafe? Or do they, for example, if they're very socially isolated, are they going to the supermarket just so they can actually talk to someone every day? You know, actually, you know, if you're able to provide an extra coffee morning, they might be having more meaningful connection with people who are in a similar position to them, rather than just having to try and get 2 minutes out of somebody at the checkout. You know, it's those sorts of things you're trying to get at, basically. So as I said, I would focus on these two. Should be defining the unmet need and whose unmet need it is. You can take from the other boxes, but really focus on potentially why it's important to meet that need and why it's not being satisfied. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes on this. If you're finding it tricky, just don't worry too much. The idea is just to give you an idea of how this the process works. Thanks.
Well, I thought that was easier.
Oh, there you go. Interesting. There you go. Yeah, I thought, because this is getting down to actually, I think, what the people really like. And yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I'm pleased you found that easier. Great.
Yeah, because I could relate it to a specific example with somebody who came in into the church recently, who obviously had some sort of learning difficulty, and came in really for company. And so we felt, you know, we could make him a cup of coffee and a biscuit and chat and make him feel valued.
Yeah.
And I guess what distinguished him was the fact that he'd had the confidence to come into church.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of people seem to be almost scared of going into churches.
Yeah.
But he came in and, fortunately we were there. He didn't know there would be anybody there necessarily. And, obviously we hope that he seemed to go away happier than he'd come in, which is, yeah.
Yeah. But I'm pleased you found it easier. And I mean, that's the thing we're looking for, is trying to unpack, you know, where that connection is. So I'm pleased that, and it's great to have a really good example. I think if there are anybody else who is struggling with it a bit more, that's really helpful. Mike, how did you find that? If you can hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, struggling a little bit because our aim is to attract groups really rather than specific individuals. So it's kind of looking at the kind of, I can look at the group makeup, the kind of people. So if we were looking at, say, wanting to hire the sports hall, it'd be groups of friends, work colleagues, come for a group of five-a-side football or something along those lines. So I can look at their personas individually. It's just how do you attract that first contact to the person who's going to organise it, because we're not organising the events, we're just, you know, putting the facility available for them. Yeah, well, it's a good question. What you might end up actually finding you need to do is having two audiences there. So one for the actual participants, the people who are in the groups, and then for the person who is the contact for the group, because you may find that actually what you're trying to do on some level has to speak to both of those things. So, and this is where you may need to go away and have a bit more a thought and talk to people a little bit more. But my gut feeling is you may well end up needing to do a second pass on that and actually almost subdivide the two groups a little bit, just to make your life a bit easier, because I know what it's like. I've been in that sort of situation where your organization's sort of doing two layers of stuff at the same time. So you may well find that actually your messaging has to say something that's going to connect with the group coordinator, but also have some things in it that are going to connect with people who are actually going to come along as well. Yeah. So I would suggest have a go at doing it for both and see if that helps. Okay, thank you. Catherine, how did you find that? I think she might be having trouble with the computer again. Okay, all right. Well, I think in the interest of time, I'm going to press on because we've still got quite a lot to cover, and I know Dan's got loads of things he wants to work through with you guys. But thank you so much. You've really, really engaged with this stuff brilliantly, and I'll leave you in Dan's capable hands to talk about what you do with all this information next.
Brilliant, thank you. So I think what I want to start with is kind of done a lot of work in the first sort of hour and 20 there in terms of audiences and thinking about who it is that you're talking to. But I kind of want to apply very briefly a similar exercise to your own organisation. So we've now built, you know, at least a surface level, in some cases quite in-depth understanding of who that persona is and who it is that we want to be talking to, in particular the unmet need. And I think now it's about how can your organizations meet that unmet need, and what is it that makes you different to other organizations that might be doing something similar. So simply kind of, what is your USPs for your organization? How is it that you can help your audiences better than anyone else, differently to anyone else? And it doesn't have to be the service you provide. It could be how you provide that service. It could be the team you have that provide that service. Anything can be a USP. And I think that's what I just want to start with, giving a bit of thought to, because it will help build out from a content perspective what we create to talk to the different audiences and what we include in that marketing content. So I'm going to give sort of 5 minutes or so just to have a think about this, and I've got a similar framework to the one you've just done previously. But to start off with, I think about what it is that you do. What do you do better than anybody else? What do you do differently to anybody else? And like I say, it can be how you do your service. It doesn't have to be the service itself. It can be both. And similar to the constantly asking why about the unmet need, I think keep asking, is it unique? Until you get to something that you feel is, and like I say, it's quite a big question, but it's worth starting to think about today. So if we give sort of 5 minutes on that, if you're right to go to the next slide, we've got a sort of similar framework that you can work through. But before we do, does that make sense as a kind of starting point? I appreciate you. A lot of you may have done some thinking and may already have some thoughts on this already. So hopefully it's quite a straightforward segue into the next section. But please let me know if anyone's got any questions at all. Perfect. Excellent. Well, we'll give 5 minutes for this then. Starting now, and yeah, if anyone does have any questions that crop up as they're working through, feel free to shout or put them in the chat. Just one thing to add as well, in this table you've got how can you prove that sort of section, and obviously that can be proof points in many different ways, but I think interesting to start thinking about testimonials, case studies, people that have come to your service and have gone on to, you know, have left it in a better place, and those sort of testimonials that you can lean on. That's a proof point as much as anything else is. So if that's a sticking point in this kind of table, that might unlock a little bit of thinking as well. Once you've started having a few thoughts around this, what I will try and challenge everyone to do is define that USP in a single sentence. So we are, we do. How would you distill that into one sentence if someone asked what it was that makes you different? Jane, well, not sure at what point you dropped out, but what we're doing is just putting a bit of thought into. I think you're on mute, Jane. Sorry. So that's about 5 minutes. So we'll pause it there. Conscious we're fairly tight on time, but I do just want to see how people found that exercise. And I appreciate, like I said, some of you may have already put some thought into this prior to the session and have done some work internally on this as well. So I can't quite see as many faces as Helen maybe could, but if we start with the ones that I can see, Rachel, how did you find that task or that activity?
Yeah, that was really good to be able to sort of really dig down into what the offer is. Like I say, I'm now working on the audience that I'm hoping to be quite a long way in the future. So it's difficult because I'm at very early stages. So I haven't got a lot of, the proving of that it works kind of thing. But it's helped me to look at what is the reason that they would come and do what I offer.
Yeah, brilliant. And like Helen said at the start, I think these activities can be applied at any stage in that journey. So once you do start to have those, the kind of offering becomes a little more mature and you start to can think about those proof points and things, it's worth revisiting this, because when we come on to the content section in a second, it's how we can turn these kind of USPs and these talking points into pieces of content in the future as well. So that's really interesting. And I think the other faces that I can see, Linda, you're up. How was that?
Sorry, I'm just finishing something.
That's all right. No worries. Well, that's an excellent question, Dodge. So we'll move on to Kirsten.
Yeah, I found that quite interesting actually. Yeah. And pretty easy to do.
Good.
I think that's because I've been involved with organisation for such a long time, so that were relatively easy for me.
And I think it was nice because as an organisation, we don't really toot us on trumpet very often. We're quite modest. So actually sit down and go, well, what do we actually offer and how do we impact people's lives? It's quite humbling and quite, I don't know, it's just made me want to join up to the service again. You know what I mean? It just gives us fire. Thank you for that.
No, it's great to hear, and I think actually we come across this quite a lot where people get so used to what they do and how they do it. It's not until they have the time and space to sort of think about it and dig into it a little bit that the impact and kind of how meaningful that is really comes to light. So I think it's a useful tool, just to even a re-energizing tool for people as well. And actually we'll move on to kind of the next part, which is how we can turn that USP and that thinking into actually content to talk to people, so to talk to your personas and kind of engage them in a way that you're kind of re-engaging yourselves through this thought process as well. So we work with quite a lot of organizations, and I think one thing we do consistently see is that people know they need to create marketing content, but quite often don't have the time, resource, capacity to do that consistently. And I think what often we find is that results in not that much getting done, just purely because people want to make it the best piece of content they possibly can, but don't have the time and thought to put into that, and therefore kind of hold off or delay doing that. And I think one thing that we've introduced is this concept of content repurposing, which is kind of what I'm going to walk through today a little bit. And I appreciate that everyone's interpretation and output of this will be very different, but the principles of it will be the same, hopefully, throughout. So there's a few stages to this, and I think it's all geared towards how you can create marketing content that is anchored in your USP and anchored in a kind of way that is meaningful to the audience that you're trying to target, but doesn't require you to constantly start from scratch and rethink content every time you want to post something on, Twitter or put a blog up on the website. So the way that we kind of look at this is in 3 stages, and the first is what we call it. I'll say I've tried my best to avoid marketing jargon, and hopefully I will have done most of the way through. But we call this kind of first stage pillar content. So definition of pillar content is, what is it? What is that? How can you make your USP into that one piece of content that is going to add value to your audience? So for us, our audience is typically professional services businesses. And the thing that keeps them up at night, that unmet need, is that they know they need to do marketing, but they don't have the time, capacity, and actually quite often the understanding of how to do it. So our piece of pillar content is a framework. It doesn't have to be a framework for everyone, but that's it on the screen there. It's essentially it's a complete guide to how to create a marketing strategy. Now, Obviously, it's not got all the detail that you'd need to do so, but if someone wanted to, that would give them everything they needed to know about how to create a marketing strategy. So that is a piece of pillar content. It's something it's going to be unique to you, and it is never going to change. So that is what our business is. It's that framework. It's applied in different ways to different people. And that's kind of what I want to start with thinking about today. For your organizations, which is what is that one piece of content that marries your audience's unmet need and your USP that you've been thinking about? And some of you may have put some thought into this. It might be a flyer or a leaflet that you give to people that explains what it is that you do and how you can help, and that's absolutely fine. Some people may have got other things that they do, a framework or a way of doing their service or applying their service that is unique. And I think that's kind of where I want to start. So what we'll give, and like I say, if you've got that thing that exists, that's brilliant. If you haven't, this is the opportunity to start thinking about what that could be. But I think the main principles I want to land here are, it's not a fully fledged piece of content necessarily. It's not a big video, or it doesn't have to be an ebook or a white paper or whatever it might be. It's what is that one thing that if you were asked what it is that you do and how you do it, that you would give someone to say, this is it. So it's almost your elevator pitch. Again, to unlock a bit of thinking here, I imagine most of you will have websites that have a what we do section on there. And that is probably quite a good place to start, because that is essentially that is a landing page that explains everything you want to do. So we'll start there. Like I say, have a think about what you do have a think about what you might want to create. I think in the next section, or sorry, on the next slide, we've got room for sort of 10 ideas. And throw everything at this. No idea is a bad one here. Like I say, some of it will be stuff that exists, some of it that you will be things that you think might be useful in the future. But throw everything at this, and then I'll kind of walk you through what we can do with it. So before we start, I just want to make sure that makes sense to concept, that kind of pillar content is that elevator pitch. It's that thing that you give someone that says, this is what we do and this is how we do it. And it's something that will be relevant forever, essentially. Any questions before we start on that at all?
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question. I've got the USP. Is this the way that you would set that out? Is is this sort of like sending it out on a Facebook post, or not the USP, more what you're going to do with it? Yeah.
So it's essentially yes, but one step back from necessarily Facebook posts and things at this stage. It's almost like and I appreciate it's not the same for everyone. The analogy we use is, if we were in a sales meeting, what is the thing that we would leave someone with that says, this is what we do and your takeaway? And I appreciate sales meetings aren't necessarily relevant to all the organizations on the call, but it's that thing that says what you do. And you're actually about 3 steps ahead of me in terms of the Facebook post or whatever that is, and what that becomes, which we'll walk through what to do. But it's that thing that we want to talk about first, which hopefully answers your question. So if we give sort of 5 minutes on that, appreciate that's not a huge amount of time, but we'll start with 5 minutes starting from now. And as always, feel free to sort of shout if you've got questions as we go through. Okay, that's about 5 minutes. So we'll pause there on that one. But hopefully, I think the purpose of this is really just start thinking quite creatively around what does your USP look like as potential pieces of content and kind of collateral. I'm conscious of time, so we'll go on to the next one, and then I'll pause for kind of and kind of see how people found it. But what I just wanted to kind of move on to now is, and this is where we start to sort of move towards what you were talking about, Rachel, in terms of how do we actually turn this into channel specific content. So by channel, I'm talking about, you know, a Facebook, you know, a website, whatever that might be. But before we do, I just wanted to touch on this, which is what we call evergreen content. So this is typically long form pieces of content, so not necessarily sort of snackable pieces of video or a social post, but this is what is that big piece of content that really encapsulates your pillar content that you're talking about. How does that brought to life in a long form way for your audience? So for us, you carrying on the example from the framework from the first slide, what we turned that into was an ebook because that was suitable for our audience. So the content within the ebook is essentially the framework, but built out with more words around it. You know, it's got lots of more explanations, it's got examples, it's a more thorough guide of how you can turn that piece of pillar content into a piece of what we call evergreen content, so long form content. So for people on the call, it might be different. So it might be, you know, it doesn't have to be an ebook. It could be. What it could be actually is a long video of a spokesperson from your organization explaining what you do and why it's meaningful to people. I think it can be anything and everything, but I think the guides that I would give you on this one is a good piece of evergreen content is long form and packed with value. It's unlikely to need to change in 1 to 3 years, so it's going to be representative of your organization for a long time. But importantly, and we'll come on to this in the final section, it lends itself to being chopped up, cut into smaller pieces of content to then be used across different channels. So for us, as an example, we went from framework to ebook, and then within the ebook, which is you know, the long form piece of content, that became 5 short blog posts that sat on our website, which then became 10 shorter posts that went out on social media. So it's using all the same content but getting chopped up into little pieces, and we'll come on to how we chop that up in a second. But for now, I just want you to start thinking about what is that long form piece of content. Is it a webinar that is geared towards attracting younger audiences to become carers, for example? Is it an ebook that explains a service? Is it a video that explains, you know, uses a spokesperson and kind of case studies to bring to life your USP? It can be anything, but think longer form, value adding, unlikely to change for a year, and jumping the gun slightly, thinking a little bit about how it may be able to be chopped up into pieces of content, smaller pieces of content in the future. Different topics might suit different channels, and I'd kind of encourage you to think a little bit about that as well. So I think on the next slide, what I've got room for is kind of 5 of your pillar content ideas from the previous activity, and start thinking about what format they could take, and actually just starting to brainstorm, you know, what that looks like and kind of what content you could create from that piece of pillar content that you spoke about, that we spoke about before. So again, I'll pause for 10 seconds or so just for questions, but hopefully that makes sense. I think in the toolkits that you will have got, the way that I've kind of explained evergreen content to try and avoid jargon is, if you only had the time to create one piece of long form content, what would it be? And that might be quite helpful as again, a bit of a thought unlocker. So I'll pause there. I won't spend quite as long on this one. I think just to get things moving a little bit, let's do 3 minutes on this, and then we'll move into a bit of reflection on how we found that, the first 2 exercises, and then we'll move into the final piece of what we can do with this content. So we'll do it 3 minutes from now, but as always, please let me know if there's any questions as you go through. And again, if people are kind of getting a little bit stuck for ideas, think about other good pieces of marketing that you've seen and that you think are impactful, and apply that to your pillar content, your USP. Again, just a little tactic to maybe unlock a bit of thinking if people are stuck. Okay, so that's 3 minutes. Apologies. I know that's quick. But in the interest of time, we've got a couple more bits to get through. And I think, I can't remember who mentioned it at the start, but actually this is quite a good activity to then take outside of this and actually run again with your teams if that's something you want to do. Actually kind of appreciate these kind of idea generating sessions are potentially easier in groups, but this is a framework that you can apply to a kind of group context as well, just to get some more ideas going. But I'll just want to spend a minute before we go on to the next one, just seeing how people found that and kind of how people found turning that sort of USP into different pieces of potential marketing content. So we'll go, Kirsten, how did you find that? Was that an easy exercise or was that quite hard?
It's quite tricky.
Yeah.
I found it difficult to move away really from something like an annual impact report, because the USP we've got is that we're the only provider of a certain thing, and we provide that in different ways to different markets. We work with victims and families of survivors of sexual abuse, but we also do a lot of education around sexual violence. So we've got sort of two broad markets, if you like, sort of the victims and people who want to educate, professionals who want to educate. So I struggle to think about sort of more widely than the impact report, which would meet both of those groups. And then I was sort of thinking a bit things like a booklet, which is tricky. Yeah.
I think that's understandable, and I think, like you say, if it kind of will differ quite drastically by audience and also by objective, and I think depending on how that report is typically used, obviously you'll know much better than me, having no context at all, but there are ways of kind of turning that report into more sort of discussion pieces and kind of whether that's suitable, running a sort of a roundtable webinar where actually the findings of the report are discussed at length, and actually creating a piece of video content from that then allows the findings and the meaning, sort of the impact of those findings to be discussed by industry experts. Those are things that report could be used in a slightly different way for. So I appreciate that might not be completely suitable, but there are ways that could be kind of repurposed and used in slightly different ways. But yeah, I appreciate it. It can be quite a tricky exercise, especially with such a compressed amount of time as well. We'll go for one more then. If we go for Jane, how did you find that?
Well, I think because of the nature of our group and the fact we're so new, I mean, I do a certain amount of this anyway, explaining the aims, which is about promoting and preserving the heritage in St Mary's. But most of my energy at the moment is, apart from the bicentenary, is focused on doing the research, which I think is a lot more interesting for people, because then you can actually tell the stories of the people named on the memorials and that sort of thing. So I personally, I wouldn't want to devote too much energy into producing something which explains the purpose of the group, because I think if you can give examples of what we're doing, then I think that's more attractive to people to actually get involved. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think you know what you're talking about there, the research and the stories of the people named on the memorials, that's actually a really interesting story in itself. And I think once that research has taken place and that piece is ready, it's what format can that content take potentially, rather than an explanation of your kind of service and what you do, because that's a really interesting piece there. And it might be that is it could be like a video piece, it could be, like, again, the same rules apply, it could be that sort of longer form written piece. But I think that would be really interesting to almost revisit this activity with that lens of that piece of content. Once that research has taken place, because I think that sounds really interesting.
I mean, I do send things to Barnsley Chronicle and local magazines or journals or something. I mean, some of the work that I've done, I did a lot of work on the Vickers and for the Heritage Open Day last year, and I did ask Pen and Sword if they'd be interested in a book, because they have published one of my books recently, but they don't seem to want to do any more heritage books. So it's then how do you create something that people can access? And because of the amount of work that I've put into it on a voluntary basis, I would actually like to get some money for St Mary's, not for me, but I would actually like to use what I've produced as a way of trying to fundraise. But these are all things that I've yet got to explore to see if that's possible. If not, then obviously I want people to know the stories, and therefore they'll probably be made available on St Mary's website or something like that.
I'm just going to do a quick time check, because I think we probably, in order to get through the last section, we probably need to press on, Dan. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to go straight on. No, that's fine, because I think actually what you're talking about there will apply, itself quite nicely to this next section. So if we go on to the next piece, and we'll keep this fairly short, and it might be one more to take away. But so we'll spend some time on this. So the next stage, what we see a lot of organizations do is create that evergreen content really well, but actually only ever use it once or twice. Post it on the website, post it out on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever it might be, and actually that's job done. But then they're on to the next one and feel like they need to create the next piece of evergreen content. But this is where content repurposing can become really important. So, like I said before, a good piece of evergreen content, it can be chopped up into multiple different smaller pieces, what we call kind of consumable content. And I think here is where we can really start to personalize that for our audiences. So if we're targeting younger people, what are those channels that those younger people are on that we need to be creating content for? And what is it, and how can we create content from our evergreen content that's going to be suitable for those channels? So, a quick example is if your evergreen content is a webinar, that could be, the transcript of that could be turned into an ebook, which could be turned into blogs, or a webinar can be chopped up into short video clips to go out on Instagram or whatever that might be. So very conscious of time, so we'll keep this one very short. But if we pick one piece of evergreen content and just start to think about how that could be chopped up into what we call consumable content, and I'll put the lens on this of the channels your business use, the channels your audience use that you think they use or you know that they use, and then just start thinking about what you might do from that perspective. And apologies to rush through that, but if we give sort of 2 minutes here, that will leave us sort of 2 minutes at the end for kind of a few useful tools and a bit of a final reflection. So if we call it 2 minutes from here, that should see us through. Right, that's 2 minutes. Apologies, that is quick, but this might be one to revisit after the session. But what I just wanted to finish with, and we'll kind of skip a few slides actually, just in the interest of time. We'll go to the tools slide, if that's all right, Helen. Here you go. So there's a couple of useful things here, and like I said before, I appreciate that everyone's output will be slightly different based on their audience and who it is they want to be talking to, but there's some good things here to start turning your ideas and putting them into practice. So the first one is a digital report that actually was a company that I used to work for. They produce it every year, and it's an annual report that is a deep dive into digital usage across the world and across every demographic. So every age group, what channels are they using? How long are they spending online? What are they doing when they're online? And I think what would be really useful is to kind of take that away. And there's a link in here, actually to the 2021 report, but yesterday the 2022 report released, which I'll just put a link in the chat here, but we'll also follow up with. But it's a brilliant report, and I'd highly recommend going through that and applying kind of the behaviours of your audience to that to really identify what channels you should be creating content for. And once you've identified those channels, there's a good link in there, the Hootsuite link. The second one there is what specifications of content should you be creating for those channels. So the right sizes, the content length that we use. It's an online tool, and then actually it's content scheduling. So actually, rather than having to post all your content that you create, how can you schedule that and make that more efficient? And then also sort of guide to reporting. So what does success look like from social media and digital activity? So bit of a whistle stop tour, but some useful homework in there to take away. And I think one thing we didn't get to today, but is in the pack for you, is again considering what resource you have within your teams to create content and applying a bit of an action plan to that. So that's our example one. How often are we comfortable creating our evergreen content, our consumable content, and what does that content look like? And then there's just a bit of a template in there for you to fill in and just start to build that that drumbeat of activity for your organisation. So I'll pause there because I'm conscious we probably just want to do 1 minute of a sort of wrap up. And apologies, that was a bit of a whistle-stop content tour at the end there, but hopefully helpful, and hopefully everyone found that quite useful. But I definitely recommend reading that report. If there's one thing from that final slide that you do, it's brilliant. So I'll leave it there. I'll pass back to Helen, and then we'll call it a day.
Thanks, everyone. Really conscious of time, so I'm aware some people may need to jump off. One thing I would just like to do by way of wrap up is ask for a one-word takeaway on the session. What's your one word you would use to summarise how you found this session? I'm going to come to you first, Kirsten, please.
I'm sure you did that last time, Helen.
Oh, sorry, did I? Sorry.
It's food for thought. I think I can't get it down to one word, so I just need to do more.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Mike, for you.
Challenging.
It's a good point. And if there are any questions or you want more qualification on anything, do let us know, and we're happy to follow up if you've got particular questions and that sort of thing.
That's mine. I better go, but I would just say it was very thought-provoking.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jane. Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Victoria, you?
Got me thinking, I think.
Yeah, there is a lot to think about with this stuff, I think. Yeah, definitely. And I think the thing I would say is it's iterative. Just keep going on it. You know, what you're learning, capture, then think about where the gaps are, and then go out and start to talk to people, test things, give it a go. I think that's the other thing. Don't overthink this stuff too much. You know, start trying things and see what actually lands well. You know, are you getting interaction when you actually do things? You know, don't be too precious about some of the stuff. Becky.
I think my word would be useful.
Great, thank you.
So yeah, just taking a lot from the session.
Great, thanks. Julie, for you? Not sure if Julie can hear us. I'm going to move on just in the interest of time. Linda?
Inspiring.
Great, that's a nice note to be wrapping up with.
Abigail would like to say.
Yeah,
as well.
educational as well. I found it really, lots of ideas are going through my head right now, so I need to go make some notes. So thank you.
No, brilliant stuff. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. I think last but not least, I hope I've covered everybody. Shout if I have missed anyone. Rachel.
I got my mic down. Focusing. I do this. I do marketing. It's something that I offer other people, but I can't market myself.
Yeah, it's a big difference, isn't it? Absolutely. And I think that's the thing. Quite often you're so close to this stuff, it's a lot harder doing it for yourself and with the stuff you do every day. So yeah. I'd also say for any of you, actually, get some other people involved who are close to what you do but aren't doing it every single day. That might really help give a lens to a bit, and you know, new words, new ways to think about what you do, because there's some stuff you're just too close to sometimes. I think speak to some people and get some feedback. It definitely helps. Dan, any final comments before we wrap up?
No, I think just hopefully everyone found that useful. I appreciate it's a lot of information crammed into 2 hours, and you know, you can spend days and weeks on this stuff, but I'd kind of encourage you to use the frameworks from today and kind of revisit them with teams and sort of build them out at each stage. But hopefully, you know, everyone found it useful, and yeah, that's it from me.
Thanks so much. And I'd just like to say thank you to you all. It's been a really pacey session. We've covered a huge amount of ground. You've been brilliant. And if there is anything else you want follow up with us, just let us know. But you've been great. And thanks for your patience with the pace of it. And we covered a lot and you've done brilliantly with it. So good luck. And yeah, I look forward to hearing how it all progresses. Thanks so much. All the best. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.